welcome everyone today to our Education Committee meeting for October the 12th, 2021. And I'd like to acknowledge that we are on the traditional and unceded territory of the Comox First Nation, and we are thankful for the opportunity to work with their families and to teach their children. I'm Michelle Wade, and I'm the Vice Chair of our board, and I'd like to welcome everyone here today. And tonight's topic is mental health. And what I'd like us to do first is I'll go to my right and have all the trustees introduce themselves. And then we'll do a big circle. Sheila?
I'm Sheila McDonald, trustee for Area A and currently the board chair.
Hi, I'm Sarah Jane Howe, trustee, Village of Cumberland.
And I'm Tanya Frawley. I'm the trustee for Comox.
I'm Kathleen Huxby. I'm one of the two trustees for City of Portland.
Do you want us to?
Sure, we'll just do the circle. Yeah.
I'm Tori Schultz. I work for the Ministry of Mental Health and Addictions. I'm the district program developer for integrated child teams for Australia.
I'm Esther Schatz, and I'm working with Tori on establishing the integrated child and youth team, and I'm a representative from the school district on that committee.
John?
My name is Sean Underwood, and I'm one of the directors of school districts.
Good evening, I'm Jay Dixon. I'm the director of instruction for School District 71. We'll be looking at secondary programs and a variety of other appropriate ordinances.
Ian Collier, director of instruction, elementary programs, early learning, etc.
John Porter, director of information technology.
Tom DeMail, superintendent of schools.
And Janice Cave, trustee.
Great, thanks everyone. So we're going to start off tonight learning about the Pathways to Hope, and I'm going to turn it over to Esther.
Thanks, Michelle. If you recall, a little over 2 years ago, we all met at the multi-purpose room at Vanier, where the then provincial government announced that our community would be taking part in what they were calling the Pathway to Hope. And what we've since learned that our community was chosen to be one of the first of 2 communities to undertake a switch in service delivery model around mental health, addictions, and substance abuse. That would mean that our entire community partners, all the agencies in the community, would be switching up how we provide service to our students and our families. Tonight, we thought that since it has been 2 years, and since this particular group hasn't really heard what is happening with Pathways to Hope or with the integrated child and youth teams, we thought it would be important now to fill you in, give you an overview of what we have been doing for the last 2 years and how we are planning to move the initiative forward. And saying that, my role is just I sit on the implementation team of the integrated child and youth team, so it's a kind of like an overseeing committee. Also on that, at that table is John Howard, Angie Prescott, Curtis Cameron from MCFD, Ming Huao from Mental Health, and Shauna Kazil from Island Health. So we are the overseeing implementation committee, and Tom sits on the big steering committee that is I'll go with 10 levels higher than the overarching body is to what the work is that we're doing. So tonight I've asked Tori to really give us the overview and the introduction, because as the district program developer, she has been instrumental in guiding the community in the service delivery model and in being kind of the liaison between community and the government, which has been very, very important to us. So I'll turn it over to Tori and only jump in as you know my style.
Yeah, also my style. Thanks, Esther, and thank you for having me and us here. So this presentation is quite generic. It's a general overview of integrated child and youth teams. So I'm curious if, because I don't know what people's knowledge is up until this point of ICY teams and Comox Valley's affiliation with them. So I don't know if anyone wants to let me know. I know nothing, or I've never heard of it, or I was at that meeting that Esther said. Just curious if people's understanding at this point. Anyone wants to share?
I'd go with,
Okay.
let's start.
Okay,
Let's
do it.
start, and if you have questions throughout the presentation, we will field those questions as you think of them. And then if you have questions at the end, we'll certainly take questions at the end.
Yeah, but feel free to interrupt me as we go as well. Okay. So thank you, Michelle, for the territorial acknowledgement. This one is self-evident, so the acronym we use for integrated child and youth teams will follow. You'll hear about them being called ICY teams. So they're a part of the Pathway to Hope document that was produced 2 years ago by the Ministry of Mental Health and Addictions, and within that Pathway to Hope document is the section on improving mental health and substance use services for children and youth families. Within that, there's ICY teams. And the idea is it's grassroots, community-based, the ICY teams are a multidisciplinary team that delivers wraparound service. So right now, as we know, the model of service delivery for mental health and substance use and addictions is most people are working in silos. Even though Comox Valley is very collaborative and integrated, the policies and all the legal stuff that comes with, making sure people are allowed to share information and work together, that's what my little team with the Ministry of Mental Health and Addictions is doing, is that we're making sure that those policies are in place so that, organizations, ministries, on-the-ground community agencies have full permission to work in an integrated and collaborative way. So it's a shift in the way that the current model of mental health and substance use is working, so that the child, youth, and family is at the center of care, and then the services that they're accessing, whether it's one or more services, wrap around that family. So rather,
Does that include funding from like different areas too, or like that you'll be able to help people with, like?
You mean like social assistance?
Well, any kind, I guess, because there would be like people that get all kinds of different funding that would be coming to see you that would need guidance, or is that not the purpose?
it's not the purpose, it's more of a different model or a different way of operating and a different way for partners, agencies, ministries on the ground to deliver mental health and substance use services. So what it's doing is it's leveraging, the idea is to leverage existing mental health service providers and increasing the capacity so that it makes it easier for the child, youth, or family to access services. So they're not, like right now, a lot of the time, families would be jumping between different organizations, retelling their stories. People are working in silos, they're independent from each other, they're trying to collaborate, but they usually just don't have permission to at this point. So ICY teams are removing barriers. So it's the model that's more different rather than like, hey, this organization gets this amount of funding, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But if there was a family who was part of the, referred to the team, and if funding was an issue, it would be addressed by the team in some fashion.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I have a question about the referral process and how they get referral, and it's a two-pronged question. Most people, if they have a doctor, and we know that in the Comox Valley there's between 15 to 20,000 people in this valley that do not have a primary health care giver. So when you're talking about students and children accessing services, quite often in the old days, they would go to their family doctor who would refer them to another organization. That is a big gap we have in our valley. So when you talk about referrals, how are, with that being part of one of the problems we have in accessing care, mental health care, how is this going to maybe support that or fill that gap? And the other one is, how do we get people referred? If we know someone who is in crisis, what process, or probably maybe you haven't got there yet, would we be able to direct them to those support services? Because what I hear from people is, I need help, I don't know where to go, and when I go somewhere, it's 6, 9, 10 months to get someone to actually to work with you. And speaking from personal tragedy with mental health, that wait time is paramount to those children going further down that road of mental health and addictions. And we all know when you're in pain, you're going to take whatever you can to ease that pain, and that's where you get that addiction for. So that's kind of my two-prong, probably loaded question, sorry.
No, it's all good. I'd like to answer the second part of the question first.
That's okay.
Yeah, so the idea is, it's a really good question because it's an integral part of the model. The idea is there's no wrong door and every door is the right door. So if we talk about, first access to services, the referral piece, as actually part of like drafting the form. So the referral form, for example, is public, it's external. Anyone, I always use my uncle. Anyone and their uncle can refer, like dogs and uncles. Like I usually have an example. So that the idea is that all organizations, primary care networks, everyone has access to that referral form, or like it's a very easy, simple, low barrier way to be referred in. The model also supports, right now I'm working in a lot of organizations, I'm going to use CYH because that's a main service provider for moderate to severe mental health. The model is based on referring out. ICY teams remove barriers, and the idea is to invite in. So there's that shift. Did that answer the second part of the question?
Yes, correct. Yeah, sorry.
Okay, we can get into more of those operations.
Okay, yeah.
And then the first part with so on an ICY team, the core team does not include primary care providers, but the new model has opportunities if someone did have a GP, which is amazing if they do in this town, but if someone had a GP and that GP wanted to be a part of their care and be a part of their integrated care plan, they could say, I want Dr. Joe to have access to my clinical notes and to have his information, and they would be invited in on that person's care.
So Tori, would you, I'm not sure how many slides that you have for us. Do you want to go through them all and then have people to maybe make a note of their questions?
Sure.
And then circle back all together? Is that your preference? I want to make sure that you get through them all.
Because it might, so maybe that, because then if I answer them, then that might come, I might answer them. So how will the teams work together? So they are, as I said, multidisciplinary, they're collaborative, they're integrated. A lot of what Comox Valley is already doing, likely why they were chosen as the first two communities to implement ICY teams. We're just providing the structures to make it less barriers and to make it even more integrated and collaborative. So the other piece of the model that's really important is it promotes outbound service delivery. So rather than telling children, youth, and families to come into a certain office or they have to be located in a certain way, we all know barriers to accessing services. We know what those look like. They could be financial, they could be transportation, they could be all the above. It could be, certain offices increase trauma response in some people with families and cultures. So the idea is children and families have more opportunity to advocate for themselves where they would like to receive services. So the difference is, as I said, the current model is about, there's a bunch of services that exist and people can be referred out, even if those circles on the outside are collaborating and integrated. The ICY team model has it so that they have full permission to really wrap around and provide that integrated wraparound care, which would help with navigation of services as well. As we know, we
teams that would address the needs of our whole community. And during the 2 years, that changed to 2 teams. And the job of education was to divide the district, which is the practice area, into 2 teams, which we did probably over a year ago. So that there are 2 kind of family and school teams that our 2 teams will operate through. And that means parents and families who go to Miracle Beach would go to one team, and maybe the parents and families from Aspen would be part of another team. What we tried to do was put the secondary schools at the top of the team and then work the feeder schools in so that there is a degree of familiarity within the team and within the professionals. And so we did that with both teams.
So the reason school districts and that kind of mapping process is really important is because in the cooperative co, the long-term vision and what will end up happening is all across the province, ICY teams will be happening across all 60 school districts. Comox Valley being the first. And so, of course, we know that people don't necessarily, not everyone attends school, not everyone attends public school, so everyone, if no one will be refused service, if you're eligible for an ICY team and interested in like ICY team services. So that includes independent schools, First Nation schools, it includes people that are unschooled or homeschooled, and so the school district, that mapping process just gives a starting point, so how ICY teams will be, teamed up and organized. Literally visited on that. So, yeah, if someone's already receiving mental health services, like for example, if someone is off of, or even on or off the wait list right now at CYH, for example, the ICY team just provide more opportunities to get like a more holistic wraparound service if they want that, if that family prefers that.
And just as a point of clarification, CYMH is mental health, is child and mental health, just in case anyone was wondering, because Tori uses a lot of those. And I often
I have
stop
on my
her and
paper
go,
right now those initials with a question mark,
Yeah.
because I was like, I have a question and I
I'm
think
so
it's
sorry
about
for her
that,
and go,
so I'm
"What's
just
a
gonna.
PDA? What's an?
I'm so sorry. Okay, so
No, you're
Okay,
fine, I would have
um,
just asked, it's totally fine.
So MCFD, Ministry of Children and Family Development, they contract out child and youth mental health. They're the employer for child and youth mental health. So CYH, it's often used in my work, so I apologize. Another thing about the model. Okay, so the model enhances culturally safe supports. Part of that is part of that Outbound service delivery model, and that working with a variety of partners in order to ensure that the service provided is gender diversity and trauma informed. And another thing with the model, back to child and youth mental health, is right now in the current model, I know I'm cutting out here now, so the current model, child and youth mental health through MCFD, their mandate is serving moderate to severe ages 0 to 19. ICY teams will be, their mandate is low is not right, low? All
severity.
All severity, I don't know why my mind is not blank, low to severe, all types of mental health issues. So the idea is that it's more preventative and that people are not on wait lists as long and there's more capacity to serve a variety of needs. Same 0 to 19 ages, but low to severe need. As the slide says. So you can, up to age 19, if the person is already receiving services, they could be receiving ICY team services up to 21, but they would start ICY team services at 20.
Originally, the documentation really only talked about adolescents. I don't know if you remember that. And the planners, the program developers, went back to the table after the community said, what about our early years kids? What about those families? team meetings, which I think we established again probably early last year. The teams at this point will meet at Glacier View in the one side of the annex and at Quiniche in what used to be the Student Services main office. So those are the two areas. One team will meet at Glacier View, the other team at Quiniche for now. The goal of the ICY team in our community is that one team would meet at another location, and that's the location where the Foundry will be, which is our big community initiative around another provision of mental health services. It's a bit more expansive than ICY. So that's where we are around location. We, as an implementation team, we are shocked that, and shouldn't be, we shouldn't be shocked to learn that there are lots of differences between the ministries that are involved in this initiative. And because of that, it is taking longer and longer and longer. Each couple of weeks, I would say, a different ministry is putting up another barrier. And right now, the barrier that education is putting up is through the BCTF. And the BCTF is questioning the whole position, the job description, and the hiring of the CY counselor that we have been allocated from. So until that changes, we will not be totally working. I mean, it won't be operational in the same way because our teams will be down a counselor in each team until the BCTF comes to an agreement with the planners and the guys way up top.
I just keep going like this.
Yeah, the ones that we don't have any contact with really. It's between the BCTF, BCPC, and their steering. So,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Well, just to add to that, like, so, something that seems like we're already doing it and it seems very natural, especially for this community to work in an integrated way. There are, those sticking points that unforeseen, obstacles that we can see, like, for example, the clinical counselor role that is employed by education on the team, that's a brand new position that's never existed. So that's just had a lot of hiccups based on it being a brand new job description, even developing it was, no one saw it being that big of a thing. The same
We
with
submitted the job description for that job a year and a half ago.
Same with the program leaders, brand new job description. So now you've got all of these ministries that are involved, that are involved, and it's part of their initiatives as well, having their say on things like job descriptions, so just things like that no one kind of knew that was, just normal life changing things. So yeah.
So there's also a counselor to be hired through John Howard.
Yeah.
And there's an issue between Island Health and John Howard and what their pay structure will be and who will pay. So there's all these little glitches that have become barriers in changing the service delivery model. And that's besides bringing all of the community partners on side. So I think we're there. All of our community partners are now on side. I think that Tori and her team have done an incredible job meeting with every single partner so that we understand what the service delivery model is and what it would mean to our community. And now we just have to figure out how to operationalize it. And what will happen is, now that we have our team leads hired, which is also a huge deal, because health hired, not education, not NCFD, but it was health, and they have different rules and different hiring practice than education does and then NCFD does. And who would have thought that it would be so different? But it's mind-boggling However, we did hire the 2 program leads
On a panel.
on a panel
In this room.
Mm-hmm.
in this room. And so the teams will now, in some fashion, after training, begin to work, with or without the clinical counselor hired by education.
And peer supported. Indigenous.
And they will begin, because we all believe that we have to begin. I think the government wants us to begin, and it has given us a date of March 2022. It was in the last newsletter.
March 2022. Oh, is that, no, that's.
That's gonna be another
And,
funding announcement.
Anyhow,
Thank you for this. And I know some of the trustees have raised their hands and they have questions. I can hear we all know your passion, Esther, for this work. And Tori, I'm sure your passion equals Esther's for this work, and I can hear the frustration and the obstacles of just trying to get to achieve what we're trying to achieve. So Sheila had her hand raised, and then Janice.
Yeah, so first I really thank you for being so patient and hanging in and persistent, because it's been frustrating, and I've been following or attending as many meetings of the Children and Youth Matter collaborative process, and knowing how much work they've gotten done and how they're working on those initiatives, and the primary physicians, trauma informed, and all the rest of it. There's a lot about youth, but also a focus on, there's a subcommittee for early childhood, and working together on all of this, and really driving the Foundry forward and that proposal. So I am very interested in how the Foundry relates. And so my experience, I mean, it's, nonprofits work so much better together, and they really have to wonder why the funding wasn't just, fund coordination of the work that the nonprofits are doing, and do the ministry work in the back rooms about those different policies and stuff. But to start over, creating a new team in this, I can see where the challenges have been. So the particular places that I know of, so my experience as a family looking for mental health services, where all you needed to know was get hold of the Davids. It was those individuals and all of their networks, and then you signed a whole bunch of cross-agency releases. But if you didn't know that, yeah, it was pretty hard. But we've had huge gaps between age 12 and then moving into the adolescent, and we have had ongoing problems about how the inpatient hospital services relate. And so are those things that are going to be addressed? The gap between the supports and the care for kids in community, which often includes RCMP officers as well, and school counselors, all these people. The hospital services have been really not well linked in my experience. So are those going to work better? And is that going to be somehow a connection? Because a lot of people, when they applied for support and their child got to age 12 and they still hadn't gotten through the waiting list, and then they had to start all over on a different waiting list, and that really not successful. Very vulnerable time. What do you think?
The intention is, yes, those linkages between hospitals and inpatient sort of there. They're not, there's no inpatient person. There's no Davids on a core ICY team.
Yeah.
However, the way, like an example off the top of my head, the way I could see it working in real life would be if someone was not connected to an ICY team and they did go for mental health or substance use in the hospital, the hospital had, like, oh, I know of this service, have that option to refer, right? And then those records could be, that linkage could be there for the ICY team to receive that information. That's one way I can see it happening.
Janice and then Sarah Jane.
Okay, so I have a couple of things. I'll try to make them really quick. One is I'm kind of not surprised but extremely disappointed at the Ministry of Education not getting their act together and the barriers not being resolved to hear that the BCTF and that are not arguing, but the fact that we can't get someone hired because they don't know there's a process is really, to me, disappointing. We were told 2 years ago this is a priority. We had the minister come to our district, stand up there and said, we're going to have this done right away. We're 2 years later, and to still hear that they haven't resolved that position is disheartening. And that's one of our roles as school trustees, to advocate for students. So as a board, I think maybe when this comes to our next meeting, I'm going to look and see what we can do as a board to maybe try and light a fire under that candlestick to get that moving, because to me, the longer you don't have someone in position, the more children are at risk, and I think we need to move this forward. We were told by Island Health coming out of this pandemic that mental health of our students was a #1 priority, and the government has to acknowledge that and realize that and move on that. So that's I'm just going to say I'm really disappointed in that hurdle that you guys have had to go through to get this moving, when we've been told all along it's a #1 priority. So it's very disappointing, and I'm going to voice that. I really am, because people know me, I have that voice, and I have provincial council coming up this month, and when they ask what's happening, I might say something. My other question is, or my other thought is, and maybe through the superintendent, when we talk about how people can access this, and I go to our district website, is there a possibility and a chance that we can have, I know we have a link on there for that bullying and all the other stuff in there. Is it something that we can do on our district website, right on that front page? We can have like a button or something like that that parents can maybe go to, and it's a quick link that I'm in crisis, where can I go, SD71 website, and then you have all those links on there. Is that something that you've thought about as a possibility? Because when parents and kids are in crisis, the easier we make it them to find help, and the simpler they're going to get that help. So that was just something that I was wondering. I was going through our website the other day. I didn't see anything for mental health, like really easy to access.
Well, this wouldn't be accessed until it's.
Yeah, but I'm saying when it comes up.
So when it comes up, it's certainly on our list that
Okay.
we would be approaching the school district to put it on a website, or to have some kind of easy access. All of our school counselors will be well informed around the ICY team and what the referral process is, and what the school-based team process is, to work with the families that are referred.
And the reason being is, follow up there, is that Friday night, Saturday, Sunday, child is having a mental health crisis.
Mm-hmm.
Mom and dad need help. They go to the district website. There could be some sort of, when it's up and running, that this is who you can contact, because it's not always during school hours when the counselors are in session. It could be that after, that 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and personally, that's quite often when it happens. On that one, I was just wondering how we can support our families, and that was just a question I had.
And we are talking about, I'm not sure that it's been approved yet, but having a generic phone number, where there would be a phone number that you would call that would link you to ICY2.
Okay, thanks.
So before we go to Sarah Jane's question, I just want to ask Sean a question, because we actually have 2 topics for tonight, and we're 40 minutes in. How much time would you like?
No more than about 2 hours.
Okay. All right, well.
Actually, I'm really
Phew.
fortunate because I can turn mine into a half hour or 5 minutes. I think this is a great conversation.
Okay.
And so I'll adjust to what you guys have.
Okay, so Sarah Jane. Thank you, Sean.
Yeah, thanks. And I think it's really important to have access to services too. And I remember last year, and I think that they're probably already in schools. Remember we talked about having that piece of paper, Tom, or the sticker, the little sheet that had all the numbers on it?
Yeah, we had those made.
Yeah,
Those were
and
handed out.
distributed, so at least then people can take them and have them at their disposal. I heard you earlier, Tori. I just had a quick question, well, kind of 2 questions. Because you were talking about eligibility and for an ICY team. So what would be like an example of something that would make you eligible?
It's so funny because I try to not use that word. That's
Okay,
hilarious.
sorry then,
No,
sorry
it's
for me
amazing that you
for.
got that, 'cause as I'm saying it
Cause I was like,
People
eligible,
do-
okay.
No, people do use that term, but I've actually been trying to
Mhm.
not use it just because it's more the language that the current and previous model uses, because I find that word, it's almost like barrier making in a
Totally.
way. And so
Yeah.
ICYT we try not to use
Okay.
that language. And it's so funny because I was like, but I couldn't think of a better alternative.
I was like,
Well, and mental
what?
health uses eligibility a lot.
Yeah,
right?
for sure,
You have
for
to
sure.
you have to meet a certain criteria
Yeah.
right now. to
So
get
more
mental
like-
health
So we're like,
services
are they a good
to
fit?
Ivan.
Yeah, like are you a good fit? Does the person, because it's voluntary
Or are the
as well.
services a
Do
fit
they
for
want
them?
the service? Eligible in that way.
How severe are you?
Really
Yeah.
broad kind of way, whereas right now, a lot of organizations, mental health service providers, know me, not many names, but because they have limited resources and limited capacity, they do have to have strict eligibility criteria in order to protect their human resources.
Yeah.
So,
Where you're more like observing the characteristics to better surround the client.
yeah, and if you're
That's
a
like
parent,
more what your goal is.
yeah, like if you're a parent that's concerned about a child and that child is no interest in accessing services,
Mhm.
well, you know what? Maybe there's a parent, like a emotion focused family therapy group that, our program leaders are running, because that's their, passion, for example, and they offer that virtual parenting session, evidence-based, 6 sessions, evidence-based group for parents and caregivers, but not necessarily, their 8-year-old that would go kicking and screaming going to access services. So there's more opportunities in that way, I believe.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question?
Yep, totally.
Okay.
And then just the other piece of it was, once you are, like I guess, welcomed into that environment, what are you guys hoping that the times will be before services are provided? Like
Oh, like
before, I guess, would it be an assessment, I guess? You would have like a group assessment and a meeting on how to support that client, and then how long before like services would be implemented, I guess?
Well, yeah, I mean, the intention is that there's less wait lists than there are now for like CYH, for example. I don't know what actual wait list numbers are gonna look like. One of the first steps that the program leaders are doing is that they are meeting with anyone who has a mental health wait list in the community, and they're looking at that to see, okay, how does this model increase the capacity, or how do they serve people on this wait list now that this mandate is more broad, and we do have a bit more capacity right now.
Yeah.
So that's the first step.
Yeah, because I would imagine it would be a little bit of like floodgates for you guys when you.
It would, yeah.
Well, hypothetically, there would be the team would meet on Monday mornings to talk about their referrals, and at that table, people would do a quick plan on what the service delivery would look like, and within that week, people would start working with families.
Yeah.
That's our hypothetical
Yeah.
vision, that is what could happen with these teams.
Cool.
It probably won't happen like that for a while, it'll take
I guess that was the
Yeah.
March thing, was the new referrals, the timeline would be around March. Until then, we think it's really important that, we look at what's existing right now and what waitlist and what ICYT model can do to alleviate the pressure on waitlists. If that makes sense.
Yep, that exists right now.
Yeah.
Cool, yeah, no, thank you so much for answering my questions.
Thank you. Do any of the other trustees have a question? Okay.
I have another question.
I know that we all probably have lots of questions. But we do have one other agenda item. I think we could just book you guys in to come every week. We could sit
Sure,
down
I
and
live right
talk,
across the
and
street.
talk to you.
Yeah.
And we miss Esther. We want to come back to Esther all the time.
I'm excited for when this is actually gonna lift off. It sounds like it's, slowly lifting off and dropping down and coming up and dropping down, and so I'm
Well,
hoping.
and we keep Tom well informed. He receives all the information in our work plan and the different documents that the different ministries are sending out. I make sure that he's aware, so if you do have questions, you can ask him and he'll send them our way.
Thank you. So I think we've all, on behalf of everybody here, we really appreciated the update on Pathways to Hope and the detailed information that was provided. And if you'd like to stay for the next presentation, we welcome you to. And if you don't want to stay, then thank you very much for attending.
The slides that they presented tonight, are they included with our presentation, or are they going to, that we can have just for reference, or is it something that we can't?
Yeah, they're in the last visa, they're linked into that.
Okay, I'll make sure that.
Just guarantee.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah,
Good
because they're
question,
really good
Janice.
for
And
information.
thank you for the invitation, but I think that will probably.
Okay.
I think, how many years, Esther, you been with us?
With a smile, she says that.
She's
for the
leaving?
third time.
Okay.
First time I can walk out on a new
Thank you.
Thank you both.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
Thank you, Esther.
Thank you.
And Sean, I'll get you
Thank
to key up.
And thank you, Tori.
Thank you, thank you. That was
Okay, great.
Thanks, Tori.
Thank you.
Sounds like we're getting close.
Good night, everybody.
Night.
Good night, Esther.
Trustee Wade, how much time do you want to give me? I can take anywhere
I
from
bel-
30 seconds to.
I believe we have, normally our education meetings are an hour.
Okay.
Oh, I thought they go to
Perfect, so I have a
6:30 to
9-minute
8.
window. I will make this quick. Tonight's presentation is actually fairly timely, mainly because it's Mental Health Month in Canada, and I think it was October 10th was the World Mental Health Day. And so it is, it's very timely. Mental health is a focus in our district and has been for a long time, but especially through the pandemic. In many ways, it's what's being turned from new normal. I'm going to spend just a little bit of time talking about some of the great work that was done last year that we've continued. And then I'm just going to run you through quickly how we've broken it up into staff, students, and parents. And I'll give you a brief window. I'll make sure that I don't go over the amount of time. So, Esther is unbelievable and she's very humble. But she created a document last year with her team. And I think trustees are probably aware of that. But it was called the Comox Valley Family COVID-19 Resource Guide. And this is still on our website now. It is a fantastic document for supporting families through the pandemic. And there's everything in there from food and delivery programs and supporting families, finding shelter and housing 24/7, prescription deliveries, online safety for children, transportation. So that's one of the things that still exists on our website and we continue. During Esther's time, schools were all polled to find out what they're doing within their schools to support mental health. And actually there was a list of about 40 different topics that were fantastic as well. The other thing that occurred was our district created what was called the Vulnerable Learner Support Form, and this was sent to all schools. And each student or family that had some struggles that was identified by a school, this form was filled out by counselors, and whatever the need was then met. It didn't matter if it was counseling or food or technology. The last thing that's continued, and those students became a priority in September of this year to be able to meet that as well. And then the last one is Human Resource Department. Any staff that is struggling or is been away for a few days gets a phone call directly from HR just to check in to see how they're doing. And all of that fits in. We're very fortunate in our district from a parent's perspective. The DPAC has put on a series of supports for parents. The first one was September 30th on online gaming. September 7th, supporting students who are targeted with cyberbullying. Another one on October 14th, and then your choice one on September 21st. So that's kind of met the need for parents. We've also had some schools that have brought in guest speakers that have catered specifically to their community parents. And a good example is Public brought in Julianne Richards, and she's a speaker, an RCC registered clinical counselor who specializes in stress and anxiety and helping parents through that. From a staff perspective, our district since September has put more staffing into counseling for social emotional support with kids, speech and language pathologists. We've had some critical incidents occur in some of our programs where we have non-talk talkers. So we brought in professionals who was talkers to be able to ascertain from the students what exactly they're going through, what are they feeling. Added 70 A's to support the transition of students, mainly primary who are at home, back into the schools, added youth and family workers, added an outreach counselor to be able to support kids who are at home that needed support coming back into school. Resources, our counselors have created, it's called Counselors Corner. Goes out, there's Caroline and Bridget and Alvini who are creating this and sending it out to all schools and administrators, every topic from depression, anxiety, grief, impulsivity, to be able to be current as well as local. We've also purchased resources. The EASE program, as an example, is supporting our teacher support kids. It's everyday anxiety strategies. As a baseline for our staff, all of our counselors at the end of November will be trained in ASSIST, which is a program for suicide prevention, which is everything from recognizing signs, understanding, providing instruction, developing safety plans. Same things happening for our administrators. Director Dixon and myself have worked on bringing in Kevin Cameron so that every administrator will work on threat assessment training, again, to be able to understand, determine, support, create plans. And these are just baselines. We've also taken it to schools. We've hired a counselor who specializes in healthy relationships. She works with leadership groups or peers within the high schools, but then we're down into the elementary schools to work with kids. So it's peers with peers. As far as supporting students, the biggest thing in talking to our administrators and counselors in September is to get back to a normal school day as much as we can. So that's supporting everything from athletic teams to Terry Fox run to grading, ball, pumping, carving, outdoor activities, and having our students feel like school is back to the way it was. To do that, though, we also kept some of the structures that occurred during the pandemic, like having different recesses, having different release times, using outside access, and thanks to our maintenance department, using, I think by the end of this year, we'll have 19 outdoor classrooms. Right now we have 10. But it was neat. We were already visiting a ton of our schools, and just the other day I was at Paniche, and they were doing reading books in their outdoor classroom with the grade 3s. It was really neat to see. Specific programs for our students, we're now doing things like transfer worry, anger, and negative thinking into resilience. That's happening in our schools. Riding the wave, managing emotions. We've restarted our groups, our boys groups, our girls groups, our GSAs, our leadership groups. We've also created new ones, brought in community members to work on groups on anxiety, support through the pandemic, which we haven't done before. Class presentations, we've provided materials for topics like pandemic recovery, helping friends, staying positive in difficult times. Our elders have worked with teachers on developing talking circles to be able to work with our students in different ways of communication and problem solving. Our schools are now holding student voice forums so that students have the ability to talk to staff about what they're experiencing and then collectively work together to be able to solve those problems. As a district, we funded groups going back into nature. So we have a group in Highlanding 4 times this year. We'll go into the mountains to hike, just kids who are struggling but can go with staff in the mountains, hike, fish, snowshoe, and just get, back, having supports to be able to deal with what they're going through at that time. We're working closely with John Allen through our boys groups to support certain groups as well. The Dumana project has started in 3 of our high schools. This is the Comox Valley Service Association partnering with the Upper Island Women of Native Ancestry to be able to offer an empowerment and skill building program. And that's 3 out of our high schools are doing that. And then little things like Fun Fridays, putting on music outside so kids are dancing and having fun. And then doing all of the creative things that kids enjoy, like pumpkin party. The last 2 things is our schools recognize that we needed to create a few more safer places, calming corners, quiet rooms, break rooms. So we've turned any available space we can into being able to do that with the nice plush chairs, the lights, things like that. And then finally, the last one is just a ton of purchases to support kids, laptops, apps, iPads, anything we can do to connect kids and to work through the whole learning environment. And that's, 2 minutes to spare,
That
so I got
was-
one more I can
oh.
say. I can say Tom is part of a group who sits on the island, or was part of a recent group with me, that Island Rapid Response was seeking our feedback as a district to find out how we align with the province and with the island, and very well so.
That was amazing, and while you were doing that, somebody nudged me and said in our calendars, our meeting tonight said it was going from 6:30 till 8.
And I just did a
So I'm-
speed.
Tell us more.
So I'm thinking that means that there's
Room for questions.
opportunity for lots of questions.
Sure.
And if that's in fact correct, that our meeting was going till 8 o'clock tonight, and then you can add whatever you wanted to add, but weren't sure that you were gonna have time to add.
Sounds good.
Maybe I can get you,
And-
Sean, to share the, one of the things, and you'll recall this from budget last year, is we were able to add some staffing positions. So now we have 2 outreach counselors working full guns, and I spoke to one of them Friday and was just admiring and she was just really impressed with the work, and she's really enjoying it, but there's a need there. And we also hired 3 additional youth and family workers. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about their role.
The outreach counselor started last year, and the 2 counselors are doing it this year, just fantastic. Their whole job is to help parents bring the kids who are at home and are struggling to come back for whatever reason. Usually it's depression, anxiety, just they've been home for a year, and it's tough to come back. And so they bridge the gap by working with the family, working with the individual students, everything from driving students to school, setting them up with outside agency support to be able to help with whatever the need is, and bridging the gap with the kids and managers for the school, because they can't do that job full time. So they kind of step in, bridge the gap because their counselors are at school, provide the necessary information that acts like a bridge. And then with our administrators, who've done a fantastic job, they do a bridging type program. We'll start with 1 block. We can get you here for 1 block. We do our best work with kids that are in our classes and in our schools. Everyone here knows that. So they bridge that gap, sets them up for a block, and then after a few weeks, working into 2 blocks. Then working into 3. Elementary would be blocks of obviously be time. We have some students that are here for an hour, right? And then we're working with them here for 2 to be able to think long term. So that's the outreach council. Our youth and family workers are very similar to the ones that exist in high schools. They do a lot of small group and individual crisis intervention. They bridge the gap with families that need a bit of help understanding the school system and how it works in elementary. And so they do a lot of small group work, self-regulation, being able, so they're not really doing the literacy that would flow the way of the LSTs. They're doing more of the social emotional support. We've hired 7 EAs, you guys are all familiar with the EAs, but they were assigned to elementary schools to help with those schools where we had some students that were kind of wondering, do I want to go back? Parents were struggling with having kids back, and their whole frame was to bridge that gap in primary. The language pathologist, the SLP, I already talked to you about as far as talkers and working with a really unique. We have some students that I think sometimes we presume to understand what they're experiencing, but because they communicate in different ways, we have to bring in professionals that can bridge that gap. So we have a talker with an SLP doing that, and then we have added time to a counselor and a learning support teacher, so that after we get the information, we can then direct it to the right people to provide the actual support that they see. And then counseling, we've added counseling to a few schools. One of the things that I think was mentioned, I think we were given a bit of extra funding, and we're looking now to how to best use that to support our students even further.
I know that Janice had her hand up, and if anybody else has questions, just shoot your hand up and I'll make a list.
When it comes to mental health and the well-being of our students, I always, and Sean, you know, I always have lots of questions and concerns. I have 2. You were kind of speaking really fast at one point, and I kind of missed when you talked about the the peer support on relationship and,
You bet. So we have a counselor that we've hired, and she's point two, and she's starting at, she works with Brandon right now, and she's gonna be starting with, Mary started a program, I guess, with that ratio. And she runs a program called Healthy Relationships. And what she does is train students to work with students. And we usually do it with high school students, because elementary students just love when the high school kids walk into their school, they can talk to them, they can relate to them. So that is what she's hired to do, is to keep, she's a trained healthy relationships facilitator, and that's what she will do.
so just expanding on that, when we talk about healthy relationships, we're talking about the respectful dating, the dating, or we're talking about the friends in schools. Like, when you talk about the relationships, it kind of, what is that? Because we talk about the consent, like, part of the relationship at the high school is a big one about what consent is, starting from kindergarten, grade 12. When Johnny's poking Susie and saying no, like, relationships, so it's kind of, is that part of it, or is it?
Yes and no.
Okay.
If you're speaking consent from a sexual perspective.
No, I'm speaking
then-
about, not sexual, I'm talking about a relationship in how we,
Then what that falls under for healthy relationships is boundaries.
okay,
And being able to say, please don't pull me, right, and walking down that pathway, then the answer is yes, that's fine.
okay. But it's not including that sexual part of it you were talking about?
Not at this stage.
Okay.
Because remember, it's high school kids working with elementary, and so it's more of a whole aspect of relationship, being able to cooperatively work within a group, being able to understand differences, right, and things like
Yeah,
that.
it's just something, yeah. And the other one, just to follow up on that one, it goes to student voice. I think it blends into that. When you're talking about hearing from students, we often concentrate on the high school students, but those early, the grade 4s to 7, also have a voice. And when it comes to, from personal experience in family, is when anxiety in school, quite often it starts at that grade 3, grade 4 level with the anxiety, the anxious going to school, the changing of the puberty and that. And I remember, going back to personal on that one there, is that's when I noticed, when I was actually working in the schools also as an aide, is that's when you can see some of the anxious in some of the younger students start just when they're changing. So when you're talking about student voice, are we also talking about working with, listening to those maybe 4 to 7, grade 4 to grade 7 students, and having their voice being heard? Because sometimes we don't hear them often.
So I'm going to be 100% honest with you. We're a little bit confused because I know that we run student voice all through the high schools.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure about elementary. Is that something that's on in elementary student voice?
With the student voice, are we talking about just having?
In high school, it's an advocacy group that actually speaks stories, right? And they provide a lot of information about what they're going through for staff. And it actually connects to a individual one. And secondary carbon hygiene plays a role in that. But I'm not too sure about elementary. If not, it's a great idea.
Or even in Lake Trail Middle School, because Lake Trail is on that one there. It's just sometimes we forget these young children do have a voice, and sometimes we don't listen to them. And especially when it comes to their feelings and their anxious and their anxiety. And I know from personal with our family is, I wish that we caught it earlier. It would have solved a lot of our problems as time goes on. So just something that I was just wondering.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea that we'll get an answer for it, because I think it's a good question.
Thank you.
Sarah, thank you. Sarah Jane?
Just to ask a little bit more on what Janice was talking about, because now I feel like I maybe don't understand exactly what the, is it kind of like a peer tutoring scenario?
Are you talking about student voice?
Yeah, no, well, I don't know now.
What I was referencing with mental health
Was that, I think I'm talking about healthy students.
Healthy
And,
healthy relationships is more peer supporting peers.
Right.
Student voice is, in all honesty, having a group of students, and usually there's a bit of an agenda and a topic where they can speak about the topic from their perspective and
And-
provide adults with their views
and those are the students that came in and did a presentation here for us, is that correct?
I can't remember if it was student voice.
Year before last
Yeah,
year?
if you're talking the one that was on environment, and that is a variation of student voice. They were more specific to environment, and they were more Keystone students. And talking about composting and all of that.
No.
That, I view, no?
No, these kids came in and they were talking about,
In the boys club, and we had the GSA students from Isabel.
And there's
Yeah.
also a club of Vanier, there's a.
There's a, I think where people are getting confused, there's a variety of opportunities in our schools for kids, to get kids involved. I mean, if we go back in the day, there was
Yeah.
student government.
yeah,
But now, as Sean pointed out, there's student voice, there's peer-to-peer support, or some cool schools call it peer support. There's very topic-specific, so environmental club, that would be advocates for that particular topic area.
Okay.
And I think what Sean is trying to outline is just an example of one of the things that has come up now as a result of some of the emphasis we're placing on mental health initiatives. And your point's well taken. You know, I know some of the elementaries do have, a lot of them use the term leadership groups to get students involved. And there's a variety of names, but the bottom line with all of them is to get students involved and actually being active in their education and in their schools.
It's essentially, and I said this a bit earlier, as adults, sometimes we make assumptions of the kids we're working with, and it's great to hear their perspective exactly on what they feel and what they say. So at Mark Isle, as an example, there's a principal's advisory group. They would act like a student voice, because that's who the principal would go to be able to ask questions about the timetable, right? Ask questions about school functions that they're interested in, and get their perspective, and then collate that with staff.
so that's what the Healthy Students program is teaching older students to go connect with younger students,
Yes.
to help them express their feelings about anything.
That would be one of the topics, yes.
Okay, thanks. That was the clarification.
No problem.
I guess I'm always wondering, like, doesn't sound like that's involving a third, an arm's length connection, because I do think that that's also something we need to do in hearing from students. I don't know if they ever tell any of us in an authority position what they're really thinking. I certainly know that I didn't. Because we didn't trust people over 30. I heard a couple of really interesting things that got me going recently on the radio. One was from a young woman who was being interviewed. She's, I think, in the Lower Mainland, and about developing Black history curriculum, and that there wasn't any, and she didn't recognize herself in any of the material being taught. And so she actually was developing a curriculum, which seemed like, the interviewer said, doesn't it seem a bit odd that you have to do this? You have to do the work. And that's often the case. So we're quite busy now doing, we've really recognized the need for more Indigenous content and education and history of the colonial experience here to be taught. But we know that kids recognizing themselves is a big piece of belonging, sense of belonging. And so it feels like an area where we haven't given a lot of thought to other populations, visible minorities, and we don't have very many visible minorities in the Comox Valley, so it tends to sort of slip away. But it did strike me that that's a task our districts should start working on, that we could have board authorized courses developed in history that would focus on the history of Vancouver Island. Especially like Cumberland, you could hit all the elements of immigration in this area that would resonate with some of our students, and it would certainly help all of us have a better understanding. So it just was a really kind of another wake-up call for the work that we do, the work that you do in particular, and the work and ways to involve students in really meaningful ways for them. That it's not an obvious connection to mental health, student mental health and well-being, but I think it is.
So one of my questions is, probably Sean and Tom and maybe Jay and Vivian, is for any of the parents that might be watching tonight, or any of the students that might be watching tonight. Wouldn't that be amazing? If something tonight triggered them on the topic of mental health, or moved them to want to reach out, who do they reach out to in their schools?
You can reach out.
There's numerous people, and a lot of it is relationship based, right? Your school counselor, your administration, your family and youth worker, your Indigenous ed worker, right? And just to name a few, a lot of it's relationship based. Esther was pretty humble earlier. She built last year one of the best resources I've seen in Comox Valley, which is titled Mental Health Resources. And it's, I think, 4 pages long of everything. And you guys have seen that. That's now been put on our website. I just don't know if it's been put on for public access or if it's just a drawing. I'll check into that because that's what I said earlier. I'm going to kind of stay quiet. But I would check into that because it's a fantastic resource that addresses literally everything, or the vast majority of mental health topics. And it would be great to have that on our website. That again, I forget what she had mentioned earlier, was just an icon that you click and then all of a sudden this comes up and you can go and take a look. But those names that you mentioned would be names in the schools. There are some some students that also feel very comfortable for obvious reasons with their teachers. And depending on the teachers, they'll either deal with it themselves or they know who to access to be able to support certain situations.
Thanks. It's just, Janice, you twigged where there was something you noticed, or maybe known who to go to.
If they go to the webpage under students and parents, it'll say mental health and wellness, and there's a list of resources, the video that we saw, plus the document that Sean's talking about.
And I think that's great, but sometimes when you're in crisis, when you're in a panic, and you need to have, you can't be scrolling through whatever it is. It's going to be at that button. You go in there, and it's going to be right there. And I know that's under parents on that one there, but I know from personally, when you're in that panic situation, you need help. You need to want to go to that page, and you want to have that link, a little red button that's kind of my help button. Push it, and that will go like it's a faster link because we've all known somebody has been in mental distress. We all know it's crisis, and it's something that's not planned. It's something that's not, okay, 2 o'clock on Wednesday afternoon, I'm going to be in mental health crisis. It's something that just comes out of the blue, and I think and it's something that we as parents, as trustees, as community members are still not comfortable talking about and acknowledging that mental health crisis, it's real, it affects everybody, doesn't matter who you are. You can be that straight A honor student, that top of the class, or you can be that child that struggles. It's non-discriminatory. And I think that we're not there yet, but I think through you, Sean, and Nestor led that legacy and what our district is doing, we're there, but I think we still have lots more work to do. And I commend you and the district for letting us trustees have that, able to talk to you about that one there, because I have been in this district where we've lost too many children to mental health, and I don't want to go through that again. And I just plead anybody, just ask for help. There's somebody there. So I'm just a very passionate person about that, and thank you for what you're doing, and thank you, Tom, for the support that you are doing with our district also. And it's something that I think we still need to have that conversation regularly.
Any final thoughts, Sean? Other than the 2 hours that you were looking for?
Other than I feel bad now that I just went.
No, it was like
It's a really big
the summary and then the unpacking.
If there are questions or topics that come up, just feel free to send them to Tom, and we can come back or bring in the right people who can say something and all that. So that's always an option.
I'm just really pleased to hear you talk so much about the outdoors and about, other aspects of supporting mental health, that's all recognized, and students don't need to be worried about thinking they're going to end up with you know, in hospital or with the counselor or whatever, when there are so many other ways, and you're all aware and you're making those experiences part of the everyday in every school.
It's actually a tribute to Tom and the district in that, because when it came to looking at how to best support students, the traditional counseling, works for some students. But in all honesty, taking that walk for 3 hours in Stratford Park and spending the night camping, fishing, and it's just fantastic for another group. So I think one of the things our district has done is look at mental health through a whole bunch of different lenses, and we're open to that. We really are. And so as suggestions come in, we write them all down too, so keep them coming in.
So when we talk,
I'm gonna be honest, I've also heard from parents that, as Sean points out, it's so true. We have some students that their support and what they need could be in the fine arts, that's their, what they use. Others it's athletics. Those have been gone for, we're just starting to see those back now. And that's another valuable resource. So when the question came, who does a student turn to? Some of our students will turn to their coach or their drama teacher or their director if they're in a production, or their band teacher. It's where they have those connections. And that's the one thing I think we can quite confidently say is throughout our system, we have people that are developing those bonds with our kids. And we encourage our students to go to any of those individuals, because that, as Sean pointed out, that's part of our roles, to make sure the adults understand, hey, if students are coming to you, what do we need to do to support them? So we're not funneling them all to one individual, rather we're open and we'll work with you and then move them to, wherever the proper supports would be. So I think it's important when we think of it, it's a wraparound. And the programming that we offer in our schools is so critical for students, whether it be the outdoor adventures, the outdoor activities, or the extracurricular above and beyond the normal class. So I'm so happy that we're able to bring those things back this year, because that was really critical.
Even things like having staggered recess. We didn't think that was any new, but if actually in the system, and you see a hallway like this one without a staggered recess, and now you have much less kids walking back and forth. That's much easier on the system than having 1,000 kids moving around. Little things like that, outside access to classrooms. I was at school the other day, and I couldn't figure out what they were doing at elementary school. And the teachers were coming up and walking their classes individually. And I went, that's brilliant. We would have never done that. So there's things that have occurred that we continue doing because it keeps a control group. It's not everyone running around in the halls and things like this. So there's all these little things that I question putting in here, but when I sent my request to the administrators and teachers, literally I presented to them 40 pages of things that we were doing, and I'm like, this is unreal, because I didn't know half of it, and I should. So it's neat to see that there's all this stuff happening.
when you talk about the quiet rooms, do you ever think about putting in one of those stationary bikes or something like that? Because sometimes it's that pent-up energy, the anxiety, they have to release it, and sitting still, being quiet is actually worse for them sometimes, rather than sitting on a bike and pedaling for an hour. Just
We're walking to some schools like Brooklyn or Lake Trail, and you'll
Okay.
see bikes around the halls. And I walked around there, and that's exactly what I mean. I walk and I'm like, and then I come back and there's a kid. And I'm like, brilliant. Like, it's just, we need to pass this information on to all this. It's already happening. But
Individual trampolines too.
Yeah.
Those are-
Trampolines,
Schools
no.
are developing those, and they're actually catering them.
Yeah.
I was in some schools where, for a particular student, it was a walk. And there was a path that this student walked. For others, it's the bike. For others, it's going into a space and listening to music.
have you seen the wobbly chairs?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Like, it's brilliant. Like, it really is. But a kid can sit there and do all this and pay attention to the whole time. And it's like,
Because that's where, because we're listening to what the children's needs are, rather than us telling them, you need to go sit in that corner and be quiet for an hour where you do time out. The child doesn't need to sit for an hour, he needs to do the wobble ball or the bike or go for the walk. And the more we listen to them and have that student voice, I think it's a better environment for all of us.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sean.
All right, so it's closer to 8 than it is to 7:30. And so I want to thank everyone for all their great questions and the conversation and the information. Thank you very much.